Hello, I'm so sorry to have kept you all waiting for so long. I know you've been eagerly awaiting my thoughts and opinions on the events of last Friday night. And I'll just say that, you know what, it's something I've been looking forward to for so long, and I thought it was a wonderful, transcendent, satisfying experience that kind of wraps up and summarizes and celebrates so many years of storytelling. And yeah, I just couldn't be more happy with what we got. But once I'd finished watching the Eras tour, I had to watch Empire of Death, which was much, much worse. And I know some of you in the audience won't be Swifties, but I can imagine a lot of you would rather watch the Eras tour than watch that dogshit episode of Doctor Who. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's start somewhere sensible to start. It's bad, and I'd like to dive into why. There's so much stuff in this episode that it's kind of hard to know what to talk about, in what order. I guess let's just go in order of scenes, like I'm some sort of fucking hack. Yeah, we kind of start, the opening is, following the cliffhanger. Sutek's been revealed and his death sand is going everywhere. And I think as soon as it kills, it's wiping out people in London, and it's like, oh, this could be real. This could be kind of, and then it kills Kate Stewart, and you're like, oh, okay. This is one of those not real consequences, I think when the Vlinks died, I was like, oh shit, the Vlinks. And then once they kill Carla and they kill Kate, it's like, oh, okay, this is temporary destruction, which I think immediately is a kind of shift. And yeah, I guess to me, killing everyone, mid-episode and not as a cliffhanger, spending a lot of part two, I don't know. To me, it felt like the cliffhanger of part one was going, this is the most deadly, most scary, most terrifying thing ever. And to then try and build on that and just, build the stakes even further and make things worse, it feels a little hollow. And, it's just, I guess, obviously we know that things are going to be fixed. And it's such a, that's not a great criticism, because we, obviously, that you can say that about a lot of things. We know the world's not going to be wiped out. But I think dedicating the time in part two to kind of try to make things as worse as possible, that to me feels like kind of wasted time, because it's instead of exploring what any of it means, it's just trying to really, really ramp things up. I like the idea that the threat is linked to the TARDIS, and it kind of uses the Doctor's travels to spread destruction. I think that's a cool idea. I don't think it's really given the attention or exploration that it deserves. I think the TARDIS, despite being so integral to the idea of it, is such an absent presence in this episode, like the real TARDIS. And I think that's, you've got the idea of Sutek seducing the TARDIS, but that's not something we ever really understand what that means, or even if it happened, because the Doctor's able. We'll get to the end of the episode later on, but yeah, I think the only real kind of exploration it gets is Ncuti's, like, the Doctor screaming out into, the void, screaming out at the universe of the destruction that he feels responsible for. And I think that moment really falls flat. And I'm someone that has been such a firm believer in Ncuti's performance in this role, and I think he's pretty much always hitting the notes that he needs to. But this really felt rough, and I think it's a kind of, it might be because he's acting against nothing. It might be because, it's such a ridiculous, over-the-top level of destruction that there's no appropriate reaction for it. It might be because we're left to linger on it for too long. Like, he just screams, and then, all right, the episode just keeps going after that. And I think that, paired with the fact that, they're building the stakes post-cliffhanger for such a chunk of this episode, it made me think, and I'm not the first person to say this, but even watching it, I thought, you end the episode, the previous episode there, right? You end it on, oh my God, the universe is dead. That's the cliffhanger. How are we going to get back from that? And then part two doesn't have to waste the time, going, well, part one was all about setup, but we didn't quite set everything up. So here's a bit more setup. You can really, end on worst note possible. And I think, you bring that Doctor Who cliffhanger sting in earlier for, well, maybe not like the sting, but like the to be continued. You bring that in earlier onto the that scene. I think it's probably a more effective cliffhanger, because then you've got the later scene of the Doctor wandering this wasteland, this new status quo. And to me, that felt really odd, because it started just like any normal new scene would start, but there's actually been a time jump and everything's changed. And I think you end on a cliffhanger, and then you start the next episode on this confusing new status quo. The Doctor is wandering. You see him, or maybe just a figure in a robe. You don't know who it is. Oh, it's the Doctor, But I think the fact that it just happens mid-episode feels quite odd. And, even maybe just put a time jump, but I guess time is meaningless. Again, that's why you get the ambiguity of a cliffhanger. I felt like that really would have helped, and it probably would have helped last week. You get Sutek out of the way earlier last week, and then you can actually get into what that means, and it's not just a name at the end of a long episode worth of build-up. You actually get, consequences, I suppose, within part one, without just, like Stolen Earth reveals the Daleks early on, and then you get kind of Dalek consequences throughout the episode, and not just, it doesn't just obscure what's going on for that long just so they can hit you with Dalek reveal at the last 5 minutes. That all being said, I thought the scene with the kind of wasteland lady, the spoon lady, I thought that was really great. It was probably the best part of the episode. I thought it was so strong. There was such kind of interesting concept there of the loss of memory and the loss of, the fact her daughter was dead, and she was kind of realizing that, and it was sad, but that she was going to forget it again anyway. And I thought that was really powerful stuff in a kind of episode that wasn't interested in dealing with that properly. It was just kind of, oh, here's one good scene in amongst nonsense clunk. I don't know, and the way she's tied into the story, it's like, oh, she's just there so that she can provide a spoon so that we can do some nonsense tech stuff. I think you probably could have made her matter a little more to the overall thing, because as it is, it's like she's the best thing about the episode, that scene. I mean, the Doctor's great in it as well, but she's, the only thing this episode really has going for it, but also she doesn't matter, and if you're looking at it very kind of economically, you could just cut that scene, really. But it feels like it wants to rush through all that it's doing that's great, and really linger on the stuff that isn't. So, yeah, I mean, despite the fact things feel rushed, it feels cramped. It feels like, because it has to dedicate a lot of its runtime to continuing the setup, then a lot of the resolution stuff feels rushed through. But at the same time, you get what feel like long scenes in the memory TARDIS with just like clunky dialogue. Like, really, they're not talking about anything really, like talking. They're just speaking like plot stuff, like really heavy, complicated, and they're carrying a screen around them with them for a lot of them. I thought that was a good depiction of how clunky it all was. Just, something actually cumbersome in amongst a script that is just weighing them all down. Downtime moments like that should be kind of the highlights of the episode, really, when everything kind of stops and you get these characters actually able to talk to one another. You think of Sound of Drums, you think of, I'm sure, other moments that aren't currently coming to my mind, but, that kind of pause to actually, in amongst everything, discuss relationships and discuss kind of what all this means to each other. But it's all so plot-focused, and it's all in this memory TARDIS set that feels really small and cramped and not kind of, I don't know, not cramped in a way that feels in any way deliberate, but more just like, this is a small set. And the way those scenes are filmed makes it feel small and makes it feel like we don't have any room to get cameras in there. I think we excuse that set a lot for Tales of the TARDIS because it's just a cute little thing they were doing. I know they were calling it a spin-off, but it's just one step away from those collection box set trailers. It's sweet, it's cute, but in this, it's like they're actually trying to, film and edit it like it's a proper story place, and it's suddenly, exposing that, oh my god, this is a cramped space for these characters to be having action in. I mean, that brings me to the fact that it's weird that we already know the memory TARDIS. We've seen this set. We've spent 6-7 episodes of Tales of the TARDIS in this place. And we're not going, oh my god, they're travelling in this remembered manifestation of a TARDIS. That's so cool. We're going, oh look, yeah, there they are in the memory TARDIS, TM. They're in the remembered TARDIS. I know this from Tales of the TARDIS. When it should be, it's a great idea. It's a great concept. The idea that, the memory of the TARDIS, depicted in the time window is so powerful through the strength of the memories that they have of it, that it is able to still operate in a certain way, is able to, work and be this beacon of good because they remember it so powerfully as being that. That's really cool. But I don't think I felt that while watching it. I felt, oh yeah, there they are on the set of Tales of the TARDIS. Isn't it, weirdly blocked and edited because the set is so tiny? I don't know. I think that's a real shame that, again, one of the few good things that this episode is doing is just is undercut in quite a major way. Speaking of something good being majorly undercut, 73 Yards gets some play here, which I really hoped it wouldn't. And it's not quite, they're not building on the Ruby mystery of it all. Luckily, they're leaving that untouched. I know some people wanted it. I never did. But I think whenever they started mentioning, the 73 Yards stuff, I was like, no, guys, move away. Leave that in the past. Leave that much better episode untouched by this dreadful one. And they didn't really, they didn't quite meddle with it, but drawing in it from it, it was just like, okay, great. I think having Roger Ap Gwilliam become relevant here is a weird choice, because the one we know is not from this timeline. The one we know is from the kind of Splinter 73 Yards timeline. So it's like, here's that guy, but he's not quite that guy, because the guy we know was stopped by the Ruby that no longer exists. And, we have a line about the Doctor being there at his downfall in the normal timeline, and it feels confused, and it feels again like a concept that is kind of gestured towards, but not really explored and not really given the space to breathe. And I don't even know if given the space to breathe whether it would be good. But at the moment we don't even have a bad subplot. We just have such an incomplete mess of one. It's all revolving around, getting access to Ruby's DNA or running Ruby's DNA against other DNA. It's just, I don't know, it just feels so weird and disconnected and kind of part of another story, really. And you've got, the Doctor going, it's all locked away under the most intense security, but guess what? I design the security. And it's like, fuck off. That's the kind of shit that Moffat was parodying in The Curse of the Fatal Death, well, actually, I had dinner with the architect of this place, and he allowed me to put a trapdoor right there, and it's like all this kind of outsmarting backstory that we didn't see, so that when it becomes like a Deus Ex Machina, it is in no way satisfying. And I think having the evil Prime Minister, introduce mandatory DNA testing, and, the government's keeping everyone's DNA on a database, and the fact that that's fucked up isn't in any way explored or investigated or even really commented on. It's just like, wow, that was easy, that was convenient, wasn't it? Good thing he did that. That helps us defeat Sutekh somehow. Speaking of things that are comically evil but the episode doesn't have any interest in interrogating, UNIT as an institution, they've got this child working for them with a Segway with a machine gun in it, and it's just, UNIT, even in all its eras, however useful they were to the Doctor, was something that the show was interested in, I guess, criticising a little bit, and kind of, you'd provide a bit of conflict between the Doctor's way of operating and UNIT's way of operating. And it seems Russell T Davies just isn't interested in that anymore, unless, it's all building to something that is. But it just feels like, no, they're the goodies, so they're the good guys, anything they do is fine, whereas, it's the bad guys that do things that we have to criticise. And, the fact they're recruiting everyone, Kate is almost cartoonishly going, I think UNIT would be able to use you, Susan Twist, Susan Triad. I think it's just, it's so funny that they're just bringing everyone on board. It's like, come on Rose, come on Donna, come on Susan Triad. It's just, I don't know if it's just, they're going to eventually start criticising or taking a look at the UNIT and going, well, actually, we've all accepted this as normal, but this is kind of messed up. And we all go, no, hang on, we didn't accept this as normal. We all said this was messed up. Or they're just getting everyone in one place, so the next time they need to do like a Stolen Earth, then it's just like, oh look, they're all at UNIT anyway, fine. I guess it's time to address the big stupid dog in the room. Sutekh in this episode is just a mess. Let's first talk about kind of his appearance back, his return. I think Doctor Who is a show where it's probably silly to get like, oh, you've undone this character's previous ending. I think that just happens. The Master comes back, Davros comes back. It looks like they're dead, but then they're back. But there's something about Sutekh's return and the undoing of the ending of Pyramids of Mars that to me, it raises an eyebrow, and it makes me go, I don't know, because it's like, so the Doctor traps Sutekh in the time vortex, the time, space-time window, space-time coffin, and it's this really scrappy victory that, he gets by the skin of his teeth, and it's like, oh, holy shit, this nearly went very differently. Sutekh really nearly gained serious power here, and that would have been that would have been a disaster for everyone. But the fact is, he got free anyway, and he hitched a ride on the TARDIS, and I think it does undercut that ending quite significantly, actually. Sutekh in that story really was a cool presence, It was this guy in this mask that was kind of hard to decipher what it was even really depicting. He had this incredible stillness to him. Obviously, he had a kind of paralysis induced by the prison he was in, but I think his voice was so powerful, but not in a generic kind of, I am the evilest man alive. It was more kind of cold and calm and calculated, and you felt that he was smart. He didn't have to be like a beast. He didn't have to be like, "Rrr." It was kind of, he was a guy. He was a kind of tangible presence, and that made him so, I guess, he kind of really felt like a force to be reckoned with as a consequence. Because if this guy was something that all the gods had to imprison, then he must be one hell of a guy. There was this really compelling mix of the mythological and the technological, and you got the sense that this was a society that was so technologically advanced that they had power that to us seemed supernatural. And they had this aesthetic that then, when observed and witnessed by Earth, kind of became the foundation of ancient culture and ancient mythology. And I thought that was always really cool, that, you have this presence that's real and it inspires a kind of a fictionalized version of that through, ancient religion and mythology. I've always liked that concept. So in this episode, the Doctor going, he was doing cultural appropriation, Egyptian cultural appropriation. It's like, no, he invented that. I don't know what point Russell T Davies is making with that. It feels like such a boomer progressive kind of gag of like, the reason maybe it's just a light-hearted joke, but it never felt like he was this god pretending to be Egyptian. It was this kind of ancient being that is then the inspiration of a lot of, I don't know, what a silly thing to say. It feels like in a few ways RTD has missed what made this villain so effective. The fact he's a big CGI dog, it just kind of sucks. And I thought maybe, when he appeared in the previous episode, that the dog might be like a physical, an animus, a physical representation or manifestation of this immense power. He's this presence that doesn't have a particular form, but at the moment he's showing up as this dog. But no, he is the dog. He's just evolved, and you get a bit in Tales of the TARDIS where Ruby's like, "Oh, you've beaten Sutekh before," and the Doctor's like, "Yeah, but before he was the size of a man, and now he's big." And it's like, do you really think that the size of this god in any way matters to how impressively powerful he is? But also it means that you don't have anything tangible to interact with, to play off. The Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa, is delivering these lines to nothing. He's going, "Sutekh, you idiot, you're evil," and it's bad. He's bad in those scenes, and he's not a bad actor in any way. But he's just given nothing here. He's not playing off anyone. He's not bouncing off anyone. He's not looking at anything, and he's just screaming at this nothing, this CGI nothing, and the design's fine, but it's just it is just a terrible, terrible decision. It's a bit of a risk, actually, kind of building up this character so much, because he really has to live up to it. He has to deliver on the promise of all these characters going, "Oh, holy shit, he's so evil," and he doesn't. He's nothing. He is just such a nothing presence. And even the incredible original voice, that doesn't feel like it's particularly important or present in this episode, because the big dog Sutekh is nothing, and all the stuff that actually needs an actor is given to the fucking spread thin like Sutekh servants, Harriet Arbinger, Susan Triad, and Mel. You've got what is essentially one job being done by three people, and it means none of them have enough to do, and it is, Harriet is a ridiculously wasted presence. Susan Twist, I said last week, I hope there is more to her in this story than just, she's the raspy servant of agent of Sutekh, but she isn't. She's not even anything, and she's hardly even the raspy agent of Sutekh, because she has to share that role with two other people. And I just think that, having built up Sutekh by all these gods, just for him to be less interesting than the Toymaker, less interesting than the Maestro, less impressive feeling than even like Mrs. Flood, who we know nothing about, and they've, all that's been done is like just little character moments from her. but she feels more impressive than Sutek, and that probably comes from the fact she's a real actor doing a real kind of performance that is able to be interesting, unsettling, off-putting, whereas big CGI dog is just that. I think there is something interesting and compelling about, the Susan Triad, the Susan Twist characters being created by the TARDIS perception technology or by Sutek, wherever they land. And I think that's something that could be an episode in itself, but wasn't, because the episode's not actually that interested in it. And it is, it's like, tying it into the Susan Foreman expectation, it's kind of like, we've created you the perfect trap, Doctor, but only in one of her personas will she be called Susan. And it's like, what's the point of her being that woman if only in one of those cases is it kind of, I don't know, maybe it's all leading to that one moment, that one Susan Triad, but it just feels very strange to build everything around one particular misdirect for the Doctor that is very, very quickly kind of dismissed as an idea, and it's ridiculous of them to ever really humour it. And yeah, as I said, seducing the TARDIS is a cool idea, but does Sutek even manage that? Because the Doctor is able to regain control of it by using, his signature whistle that he always uses to control the TARDIS and activate the TARDIS death ray to disintegrate Harriet. I just think it's, again, a really weird thing where there's an idea being pointed at, gestured towards, and just kind of, there it is. That's enough, isn't it? We don't need to do more than that. Yes, please, I'd like more than that. I will say I quite liked Ruby being so important to that moment of defeating Sutek with the rope. I like kind of companion saving the day moments, and I feel like Ruby has kind of not quite had enough of those, but that moment with Sutek, it felt a bit off to me. And on paper, I think I quite like the idea of this all-powerful god being tricked like that, and it being something like that, but I think it just felt, I think maybe because he already felt kind of naff, just the idea that he was this shit dog that you could actually just drag around. Not at all mentioning the fact that they kill him by dragging him into the time vortex, even though he grew and evolved in the time vortex, and that's kind of how that's how they previously defeated him, and it meant he was able to survive and evolve. And so that just felt ridiculous and weird as well. That moment is not helped by the fact that the Doctor is just going, maybe there's not enough kind of theme and subtext in this episode, I'm going to start saying it myself. And he's like, usually I fight the monsters, but I have to become a monster now because I'm killing you, and that makes us just as bad. And it's like, great, thanks, Doctor, for spelling that out for us. Just really clunky, really obvious, really dreadful rubbish. Just thinking about it just depresses me. Because also, like, no, you're not the same as him. He genocided the entire universe, and you are stopping him from doing that and bringing life to the universe. That you are not the same thing. I think sometimes when it comes from another character, like if Sutek was a real character, maybe he would start questioning the Doctor's morals. And although he's evil, there's a moment of the Doctor going, God, he's called me out there. But then I think also you run the risk of, like, Davros saying, you're the destroyer of worlds, after planning on, eradicating the entire universe from existence. So sometimes even that's a bit silly. But I think when it comes from exclusively the Doctor, and he's just going, oh no, this makes me evil, and he just literally just zapped Harriet to death with the TARDIS death beam. So it's like, I don't know, it's bad. That's a bad moment. And yeah, the fact they fix things by bringing death to death, and that causes life and everything's fine again. I think in a better episode that would ruin it, but this was an episode that was kind of shit to its core, so it is just another one of those, fine, fuck it, yeah, if you're saying that, great, death to death, everyone's fine again. Can we end this episode now? No, we can't, there's still a lot to do. I thought they had something there, like sand as a kind of elemental force, sand being Sutek's way of bringing destruction. I thought that was a cool image, and I thought it was kind of like an evil version of Ruby's elemental force that she was always kind of bringing into existence. She made it snow, he made it sand, and I was sure that, like, visually and story-wise, they were building to this kind of incredible resolution there. Not necessarily incredible, but this cool resolution of, like, you use sand. No, sorry, you use snow to end the sand. Ruby is able to channel whatever goodness and love. Sutek's bringing hate and death. Ruby is bringing memory and her mother and all that, and she's able to combat sand with snow. And I thought, as a visual, as a story moment, that would be good. And they make nothing of it. It's just two very similar parallel ideas that are never brought into any kind of conflict, or used to create any kind of resolution. And I thought that was so funny, because that as well would make a great reason of tying in the Sutek stuff with the Ruby mystery, because throughout both of these episodes they have felt so separate. Obviously they find a few ways to bring these two sides of the story together, but it just feels so arbitrary. It feels so like they've just, both of these mysteries need wrapping up because it's the finale, and not because they're happening in any way at the same time. And I rewatched the cliffhanger of the previous episode, and you've got kind of the Sutek mystery happening on two fronts. You've got kind of in the unit HQ, you've got Sutek himself appearing, and then you've got Susan Triad over at her place doing that. But then you've got the third part of the cliffhanger, which is Ruby back in the time window going, why can't I see my mother's face? Why can't I see her? And it's like, it's such a kind of, get over it, Ruby. This is not in any way connected, and not any different to how it was previously. She is... I mean, it's not Millie Gibson's fault, but they're making her try and sell that the urgency of that moment is as important as everything else that's going on. And then the starts of this episode as well. The doctor gets to the time window and Ruby's like, oh, why can't I see my mother, doctor? And the doctor's like, shut up. There's other stuff going on. But it's like, he shouldn't have to do that. They shouldn't have to have that moment, because it doesn't feel like her stuff should matter here, really. We eventually get the reveal that, Ruby's mum was no one important, Ruby is no one special, and, I think if you told me this a few weeks ago, that this was the direction it was going in, I'd go, cool. On paper, I like the idea, I like The Last Jedi. They're going to find a way to make it satisfying and interesting, and they didn't, did they? God. No, they didn't. They say some bollocks about, like, it only had importance because we felt it should have importance. We gave it importance, and that's how the world works. That's how war and religion and love stories work. We thought it mattered, and then it mattered. And I just think that doesn't make sense. And not in a sense of like, that doesn't actually scientifically make sense. But no, that doesn't work. Like, narratively, it doesn't mean anything. He's just gesturing again, like going, oh, that'd be a cool idea. Yeah, let's say it's kind of that. It's like, no. and this isn't me, like, 73 yarding it going, I need everything explained. But no, I just think it's kind of, it's pointing at something that might be interesting if you make that the point, but not bothering to make that the point, just going, yeah, it's that. Trust me. That works. That sounds poetic enough. And it's kind of what people who don't like Stephen Moffat say Stephen Moffat does. But there's always thought to Moffat. There's always depth. Whereas I think you scratch the surface of this Russell T Davies kind of like surface level, wafer thin kind of, meaning, theme, whatever. You get nothing underneath. There is no thought behind this. Apparently, Last Jedi was a bit of an inspiration there. Obviously, it was something I thought about. But I don't know. He spoke about, like, he liked when Rey was no one, but and didn't like when it was changed. Which, by the way, correct point. He's right about Star Wars there, but I don't think he understands why he's right about Star Wars, because I think there's so much going on in that Rey story that is not really transferable to this Doctor Who story that he has solely written. Rey was special and extraordinary, but she had power that made sense in the universe she was in. She had an incredible amount of like force capability, but that was something that the fans were going, well, that has to mean but she's related to someone. It was a case of like, her power was her own, but fans wanted to assign it to someone else. And that was an interesting thing to then subvert and go, no, it was hers. It was her power, actually. Whereas like Ruby having all this kind of supernatural stuff and then subverting that and going, no, she's totally normal. That doesn't make sense in Doctor Who. You can't be totally normal in Doctor Who and then be causing all that. But I think it also goes beyond that and becomes a kind of, it misunderstands the character stuff, and that's the more important stuff that The Last Jedi was doing. Rey and Ruby both obviously have questions about who they are and how they fit into the universe and the galaxy. And I think what Rey wants is the easy answer of kind of, you're connected to so-and-so. You have your role in this story is because you are connected through here, and also your parents abandoned you because they had some incredible calling. They were someone so important that they couldn't stick around. And so for her, the fact that they were no one and that they just abandoned her because they sucked, and that she doesn't have any easy answers to finding her way anywhere, that is an interesting place to take her character. And not only does it allow her power to stand on its own, it throws her into a kind of turmoil. Whereas Ruby, she gets kind of, I don't know what answer she wanted. She doesn't seem unhappy with this answer, that her mum was just a normal person who left her for nice reasons, I suppose. I don't know, it's not challenging her in any way, and I don't think it necessarily has to, but I think it's, what are we doing, really, if not that? And the only thing it really has going for it is it's subverting the expectations that it has built up completely on its own. You know, I think the idea that she's presented as this normal character with this backstory we don't know, and we as fans read into that and go, oh, what if it means this? What if it means that? What if it means that? And the episode goes, no, actually, she's just normal. This is a normal part of life. There's just this woman who was too young to raise this child, and she did the right thing and got her to safety. But it didn't allow us to assign that meaning. It told us there was meaning. It gave us all these reasons to speculate. It told us all these things, that this is not normal. This is not something that makes sense to anyone. You know, the maestro is thrown by it. Sutek's thrown by it. The ambulances in the future that should have access to all the DNA information that they use in this episode to solve the mystery, that's thrown by it. There's snow. There's all this. So it's almost like Russell's had this idea of like, allow the fans to speculate, you know, irresponsibly, and then go, actually, no, it's a normal thing. But then he's gone, but what if they don't speculate? What if they see it coming? We've got to make it look as weird as possible and then subvert that. And it's like, well, no, hang on. Then you've just defeated your own point. And I'm not bothered necessarily as much by like, what do you mean all that stuff happened, but she was normal and she was no one? I think some of that discourse is getting a little more into kind of anti-Last Jedi discourse, but I think it definitely misses the point of what works about The Last Jedi on so many different levels, you know, as far as the mystery, as far as the meta commentary goes, because it's not a crazy subversion. For the Doctor's companion to be a normal human being, that's pretty much the standard. You're not going, oh, you know, you thought because she was the Doctor's companion that she would be tied into something more extreme. But no, that's fairly normal. It's kind of, I think they eventually become in some way significant, but you're not doing a massive subversion of the text like you are in Star Wars by allowing someone to come from nowhere, and it's not just this kind of big genetic lineage that they're talking about. And I think, you know, Rian Johnson was subverting and commenting on the work set up by a different writer, by J.J. Abrams and by the conventions of the fans. But Russell T Davies is answering his own questions here, and almost, you know, laughing at the fact they even existed and going, oh, these questions don't matter. It's like, no, hang on. You invented them, old man. So I think that's just a mess. And I thought the scene at the end with Ruby reuniting, I thought it was confused tonally, because you've got the Doctor making these very valid points of like, you know, she left you behind and she has not made contact and she's not been discoverable, and, you know, we have crossed a line, I suppose, in getting you here to meet her, and, you know, if she didn't want to be found, we then, you know, should we respect that? And it's so weird that the Doctor is entirely right there and Ruby's like, don't care, I'm walking in, and then you meet her and it's, I don't know, it all feels a little misjudged. I think Millie Gibson is really good in those scenes. I think that's a strong performance from her, but it feels hollow and weird and just confused tonally, that it's kind of bringing up some ideas and not doing a great job of arguing against them, and in other cases not bringing up some ideas. Like, you'd think there'd potentially be a line from Ruby or from Carla, who I feel again has been completely fucked over in this episode and the whole season, really, of just not quite mattering. And I think you bring Ruby's birth mother into the fray, you kind of need to address the fact that Carla still matters and is still Ruby's mum, and they don't even have a moment like that. I mean, Carla's obviously nice to her and they're nice to one another, but it feels like there's something that needs addressing, not to bring up a conflict between them, but to almost, you know, reassure us that there isn't one. It's especially in an episode that is very much prioritizing one of Ruby's mothers over the other. And I think, I don't know, I mean, Ruby even refers to her as her real mum, you know, and, you know, she, what's she called? Louise Miller. She says, my mum, my real mum. And Russell's like, oh, you know, we said that deliberately because, you know, that's the kind of messy thing that a human would say. But I don't know, that feels like some of these things feel like exactly what you'd want to bring up in a meeting about an adoption story and go, what do we need to avoid? And I think, yeah, sidelining Carla for the real mum just feels like one of those things. Sorry if I'm a little all over the place here, but I just think it's really funny. I'm remembering now to do like, I don't know, to lean now into, actually, this is grounded, this is real, this is just a teenager with a child she couldn't take care of, doing the right thing, and also going, Wes, when she was in that incredible, mysterious cloak and pointed dramatically at something, she was pointing at a sign and naming her daughter. Isn't that beautiful? And it's like, I think it's so funny to go, no, we're grounded and serious now, but also we're doing this ridiculous nonsense thing of her dramatically pointing so a CCTV camera can go, oh, maybe she's called Ruby, which didn't happen. They didn't know that. They just luckily also named her Ruby. Great. And then we get this bizarre companion departure that just doesn't work, because the character feels so new, and because the reason to leave just doesn't feel like the kind of thing that would be a permanent reason to stop travelling. Like, I like the idea of a companion going, oh, you know what, I need to touch back in with my home life, with my real life, with my family life, but I think, especially because she's only been around for like 5 adventures, going, all right, well, that's it. Goodbye, Ruby. You need to get on with your life. Goodbye. That feels really unfair, and it feels weird, and it feels like, companions have had like breaks from traveling for less, and I think there's a really bizarre forced finality to it that, and I think you bring in all this heavy emotion and it doesn't work because, one, it's a bizarre reason for it to feel so final, and two, it's a kind of, it's bizarre to have such kind of love bombing going on with 2 characters that have not actually spent that much time together, and we as an audience have not spent that much time with. I think the scene itself is nice. There's stuff in it I like. I think the 2 leads are really strong in it, but there's just throughout the whole thing you're just like, oh, hang on, are we doing this? Are we doing this now? And there's behind the scenes rumors and stuff going on about maybe this wasn't how the scene was meant to go, and the fact that Ruby is leaving at this time maybe wasn't the plan, and then it became the plan, and then it kind of became the plan that she would be coming back. I know it's not the end for the character, but in this moment it really feels like it's suddenly going, this is the end for the character, goodbye, bye Ruby, we'll miss you, bye-bye. It just, we get in the behind the scenes, the Doctor Who Unleashed, we get a montage of other companion departures, and it's just like, oh god, this is not a scene that works in amongst them, and it really falls flat. And you've got just weird stuff going on. The Doctor going, Ruby, you've changed me so much. I love you so much. I know he doesn't say that, but I now talk about family in a way that I never used to. You've allowed me that kind of part of myself. And it's like, but weren't you the 14th Doctor, David Tennant, living with a family before? Maybe. Were you? It's that bi-generation confusion of like, but I thought you loved Rose and Donna and that's Rose Noble. But it's so weird to suddenly have all this stuff come out, all these emotions so strong and so everything, when they've just been mates. And this whole season I've not been one to say I don't even know who these 2 are to one another, because I don't think the episodes have really needed more of that, more than what we've had. I think I get the sense that they just love each other's company and they're good for each other for that reason alone. They have fun together, and that's the point. But then I think that gets you only so far when you then try and turn that into a really heartfelt goodbye, because their relationship has been pretty limited to their mates who really get along well with one another. And I think, it's and I think when they leave under such bizarre circumstances, and like it feels a little bit like when Yasmin left, and it was just a case of, I'm leaving now because the era is over and this companion leaves now. And it's like, but why can't you come back? Why can't you keep traveling? It felt to me a little like that. The whole thing feels hollow. In the episode they reminisce about the first time they met. That was like our first adventure, the Church on Ruby Road. It's like, that was fucking 2 weeks ago, guys. Get over yourselves. You've had, it's like making a friend on a summer camp or something. Maybe those goodbyes are very heartfelt, but the relationships are intense, but they're not quite long lasting. I'm excited to see Ruby again, because I do like the character, but this is a strange note to end on at this stage. Not much more to talk about there. just, again, a scene that would probably work under very different circumstances, and ideas there that would work with different characters or with the same characters at a different stage in their relationship. I think ironically, going for something that's attempting to be so substantial and heartfelt and meaningful just goes to show the lack of substance in this dynamic, unfortunately. Bringing out such a kind of intense, whoa, I feel such strong feelings here. That really is the thing that makes you go, but why? Why do you feel these things? And the answers aren't in the text. Susan gets brought up in that scene, and it feels really weird because it really felt like there was momentum going along in that subplot, that there was kind of a sense of, I don't know, I would have put money on Susan being in Empire of Death. The way it was going of even if Susan is not in any way connected and it doesn't feel like she should be, this is going to be the driving force, the momentum the Doctor needs to revisit that part of his life. And it really felt like we were getting that kind of moment of the Doctor going, actually, I do need to return there and investigate and revisit that part of myself. But no, even in that farewell scene, you get the Doctor going, I might go and see Susan, that might happen. It feels like that any momentum there was lost, and in a way that's very strange, because it felt like we were nearing a breakthrough, and that got kind of pushed aside for Ruby's departure instead. I don't know, interesting stuff. I guess other miscellaneous points that I wanted to make but didn't really get a chance somewhere else in the video. I kind of liked in Sutek's big sand death moment. I appreciated how many extras there were. I appreciated seeing, just real people and their response to things. I think we've had a lot of COVID productions in this era so far, a lot of things where actually real human crowds and things were limited, and it kind of feels like we are on the other side of that now, and we can get back to that kind of widespread destruction having widespread people that it impacts. So I liked that. As much as I think the scene itself fell flat, I do like the idea of seeing, having a sequence set within the time vortex. I think that's always cool to see that, because as much as it is such a core part of the show, we don't spend much time there that we actually see it, and I thought it did look great, and the VFX of it all looked great. It just was in service of something that wasn't. I thought it was really funny that they seemed to be implying some sort of romantic moment between Kate Stewart and Colonel Ibrahim. I thought that was really funny because I think fans have pretty widely collectively headcanoned them both as gay, and just for no reason at all going, now these two are in love, the lesbian and the gay man that all you fans have been enjoying. Yep, they're smooching now. It could have just been holding hands in relief and looking longingly into one another's eyes in relief, but just a funny, bizarre choice that they've made in a series of less funny, bizarre choices, to be honest. Mrs. Flood, I think, was pretty fun in this episode and last week as well. I like that, she had her own plans that were ruined. I like the idea of a villain being there for one reason and then some other villain supersedes them and they're just like, oh man, I don't get to do my big evil plan that I've been teasing. I think she is a fun presence. I like Anita Dobson in the role. I like where we seem to be going with that. It's interesting. It's a real actor, as I said. I like that when the day is saved, she calls the Doctor clever boy. I think that's just the idea that she is this kind of senior figure to the Doctor. Just a little thing like that. There's character there. There's moments there that you can pick apart. Do I have any faith that the resolution will be worthwhile? I was going to say no because this episode burnt me so much, but for some reason, yeah, I'll put my eggs in the Mrs. Flood basket. This will be good. I'm not fully jaded and burnt out quite yet, but I will say if they keep this up, I will be getting there. Oh, I like that Pete's world is completely fucked, that, landing at the TARDIS in that parallel universe will have created a Susan Triad and created, an agent of Sutek that then destroys everything, but that then the resolution of this episode and bringing life to all the places that the TARDIS has been, that doesn't include the parallel universe, so Pete's world and the Meta Crisis 10th Doctor and Rose and Jackie and Pete and Jake, they all get destroyed and disintegrated, but they don't get brought back to life. So that's just a kind of fun fan thing of like, hang on a second. And I wasn't the one that noticed it and pointed it out, but I think anything that has that kind of unintentional, unintended consequence is quite funny in a way that's harmless. Like, obviously Pete's world and those characters aren't dead, but going, but that means that happens, and that's a fun thing. And I think in a better episode, it would be funnier to go, wow, in this episode that we all loved, accidentally killed Pete's World, but it's kind of buried now in a bunch of other shit that isn't fun or funny. Yeah, this is the worst of the second Russell T Davies era. It's just absolute wank. It's just a waste of all our time. I can't even come to like a snappy, damning conclusion about this whole thing. You know, it's not a case of like, well, we've looked at these individual reasons, but there's one key reason why this doesn't work. No, there isn't one. It's not interesting enough for that. It is just, it's just crap across the board. On kind of every individual subplot, it's just kind of underbaked rubbish, and it's hard to even convey to what extent, because the biggest crime a lot of it commits is that it's nothing. It is clunky, rubbish nothing that is trying to convey very little and doing it badly. You know, it kind of reminds me of the worst of the Star Wars streaming TV. You know, it is rubbish dialogue, it's rubbish kind of plot beats, in service of rubbish, nothing subtext. You know, it is doing nothing and it's doing it badly. You know, just some of these scenes, man, they're just talking and you're having a headache because they're talking about absolute shite and it's in service of nothing worthwhile. Maybe that's my damning conclusion right there. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit more frustrating than that, because here and there are ideas that could have been good. And that's not that they're good ideas that feel good in this episode but aren't given enough time. Except for the Spoon Woman, that's the one thing that you can point to and go, that's great, we should have done that. Everything else feels like, yeah, if this was in a script that wasn't awful, maybe that idea could have been fleshed into something else. But as it is currently, it isn't like that. It is awful and dreadful. And I don't know, I think you really have to fuck up for me to start caring about like plot holes, right? I think criticism that hones in on plot inconsistencies and not having XYZ detail explained, I always feel they set off red flags to me. They feel like they're honing in on things that don't matter, right? I think usually when there's a plot that doesn't quite come together, it's in Doctor Who especially, it's because they've chosen to sacrifice that for the stuff that I feel does matter, the character stuff, the real narrative stuff, the story decisions being made, rather than nonsense sci-fi stuff that maybe, once you actually kind of consider it all, doesn't quite line up. But for me to be going, this doesn't make sense, this plot doesn't make sense, this story with Ruby, all that kind of sci-fi stuff, that doesn't make sense and it bothers me. I think it's because, on the one hand, it is kind of more than I'm able to let go, more than I'm able to let slide and be lenient about. It goes beyond kind of what I think is acceptable from a kind of plot holes, I suppose. I hate criticism that leans in on that, but I think it goes beyond what I'm able to go, that's fine, that stuff doesn't matter. But also, maybe I'd be, my threshold there would be higher if the stuff it was in service of felt in any way meaningful, felt in any way satisfying, or in any way interesting, or like it had something to say. But I think, it is just rubbish nonsense in service of nothing. And what more is there to say beyond that? I guess I'm going to do a full video about the season as a whole once I've properly digested what the season as a whole looks like with this finale. I think I'm not one of the people who is totally in despair, that thinks Russell T Davies is cooked, that this is an absolute it's a harbinger of doom for Doctor Who. I think Russell is a writer who has done bad episodes before, and we don't necessarily need to read into this as like, oh my god, this is over, he's rubbish. But I do think, a lot of this season is building up to this, and when you have a finale that is so unsatisfying, it does let down the rest of the season, not only because it's a bad note at the end of a very good run of episodes, but because within those good episodes there are teases for something that ended up being so rubbish. So I think I really need to think hard about where this season is. But I'm hesitant to be fully dramatically like, oh, Russell T Davies is bad now, this is rubbish. I mean, this is a man who ended his previous era with The End of Time. He was no stranger to absolute dog shit. But I think, we've got to consider where we're at and hope that this is a kind of blip and not a kind of indication of, I guess it's a question of whether this was a good writer being bad, or whether this is a bad writer who has managed to trick some of us into thinking he's doing interesting things previously. We'll have to see. I'm not writing off Russell entirely because of this episode, but I don't know. It's an interesting one, and I'd love to know what you think about it, because obviously I've given you all lots of time to think about it in my absence and come to your own conclusions, and I don't think I'm adding anything too new here. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you think of Empire of Death, and the series as a whole. I'm going to talk about season 1. I'm going to do a full review of the whole season, but do let me know how you feel about it now that we've had the final episode, because it's a sad way to be, isn't it? Suddenly disappointed in something if you were enjoying it, and maybe you've not been enjoying it, and this is just a kind of like, see, I told you this was bad, and maybe you're right. Maybe this all has been bad. On that fun note, I'm going to end the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry it was late. I hope you look forward to the next one. It may not be next week. I'm in the midst of performing a show. We're doing Jekyll and Hyde. It's so much fun. Obviously, I had Taylor Swift last week. It's all been a very busy time, and I've only just managed to kind of get my head around this episode and get this video out and filmed for you. But I hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe, like. If you're new to this channel, I've made videos about every episode of this season and the specials last year as well. I'm going to keep doing that when Doctor Who comes back, and I talk about other things, and I still talk about Doctor Who in the times where it's not on TV. So stick around. I'm a fun guy. We have fun on here, I think. Ask the comments. I think we do. I'll see you very soon. Maybe not next week. Love you lots.